Welcome to Thomas's Comparison Driving Lounge, starting with the BMW X3 M40i. That 6-cylinder. Yeah, I do recommend this engine pick for the X3. I'll show you why. So, sports mode here with the sports shifting mode, and then the sports also suspension mode and so on. And we'll start from 40 kilometers an hour. As always, German Autobahn. Let's go. 150. Yay! And that's 200 kilometers an hour, 125 miles an hour, and still going further. Air suspension is set on a stiffer note now. Very good control over that vehicle. Lane change here. Don't feel that we would be in a big SUV. Really nice. Stable on the road. Also, although it's really high speed, not too loud here in the cabin, good noise insulation, and you feel that when we go to a reasonable motorway speed, like here, 130 kilometers an hour, it's very silent. The question is, do you need that air suspension? Last time in the X3 M40i, we had the adaptive M suspension. Or you can also get the normal adaptive suspension without M for the X3, of course, then in the non-M version. And the thing is that the adaptive suspension by BMW in these big BMW vehicles is so good that you do not need the air suspension. And surprisingly, the difference is also not that notable. So with Mercedes, for example, when you have an air suspension, it's usually a very floating one, very soft, and huge difference to a normal adaptive suspension. But here with the BMW, the adaptive suspension is so good and so good in compromise between sportiness and comfort that you don't feel the biggest difference. So it doesn't really matter that much which one you have from these, actually. So what about the difference X3 and X3? Of course, the X3 is bigger and heavier. Here today we have also picked the very same engine version, so we can very well compare not what the engine makes the difference, but the size of the vehicle makes the difference. The cool thing about the X3 is it is a full-size SUV, but because the suspension setup is so good and the steering is very likable and sporty and so on, and in general the chassis is also pretty rigid, it feels very agile, really dynamic, although it is large and heavy. And that's why when you drive this one, you don't say, oh, I miss driving a smaller SUV because it is more dynamic. We will soon tell you more about that, how it really feels in the difference and when we do drive the X3, but starting with the X3, it just delivers you such a great and flawless driving experience from all the different aspects, you know, in the high-speed driving, in the agility, compromise of sportiness and comfort, noise insulation and so on. So that's really a very cool thing. As for the fuel economy, with that 6-cylinder here, if we compare to the 8-cylinder we've been driving in the X3, you save at least some 4 liters on 100 kilometers, so significantly lower in fuel consumption. You can easily score some 10 to 11 liters on 100 kilometers here with the 6-cylinder, and that would be some, between 20 and 25 mpg, and that's for the car of that size actually quite okay. One more time here in the tunnel. Here now once again you can see the great ambient lighting. That is really, really nicely done. I love that. And now one more time acceleration when we are already at speed from 100 kilometers an hour. Let's go. It's a difference that not being in a sport mode, but still pin down is comparable. And now almost once again 180 kilometers an hour here in that corner. That's really nice. So even if you're in a normal driving mode, easy to handle. Let's once again compare sport mode. Yeah, air suspension is stiffer then once again. That's a good feeling in these corners, but you can also let it run in a normal comfort driving mode. That's totally fine. But you do have a little bit more feedback in the steering, also in the sport mode, and once again in that air suspension. But the comfort mode, usually you run it all the time here in the normal comfort mode, and that's actually it. It's such an easy ride here, and also a great long-term motorway ride. So you can put a lot of mileage on it and still reach your destination in a very, very relaxed manner. Now on the brakes, also not pushing us outward too far. This is also equipped with the integral active steering. That is that rear axle steering, so that helps me really when getting in and out of the basement garage, for example. So I don't have to turn it around that often, and also helps in parking and massively reduces the turning circle. That's a very helpful feature you should actually go for with that size of a vehicle. The question is, how does it perform now in edger corners? And it's really important to remember how it performs then, and then actually to compare the X3. One more time. We go to sports mode. Now have some agile corners way ahead. Also really uneven that road. Now, of course, when the air suspension is set to a stiffer note, we feel a little bit more of that uneven road. And with the 6-cylinder, the X5 feels a little bit lighter than with the 8-cylinder, definitely. It just feels more fitting to the vehicle, I feel. And here in that corner, rear axle steering is working. Steering ratio is also really nice. Rear wheel bias, all-wheel drive out of the corner. RPM is being kept. And very smooth also. So for an SUV of that size here, handled so well. Really a lot of fun to drive. So it's not that the driving fun would be missing just because this vehicle here is so large. Really very enjoyable roundabout. Now it gets so exciting because to me, driving fun is one of the crucial things with the vehicle. Not that it's super sporty and, best lap time or whatever. The driving fun. And is that actually better with the BMW X3? Does the extra price for the X5 justify getting the X5? We'll find out. And now, time for the BMW X3 sports shifting mode, sports mode itself. And we'll get now from 60 kilometers an hour. Let's go. That's 200 kilometers an hour. Wow, nice acceleration. You also hear that sound-wise, it's more trimmed on that M tune. Really nice. And then adaptive M suspension in here. It's a little bit louder, definitely. You feel that. Good here in the lane change. Very upright also. Definitely the sportier feeling. Wow, a lot of fun. It's about a second quicker in the acceleration figure. So that is the difference then by that 300 kilograms or 600 pounds less of weight. You do feel it also in the lane change. However, the suspension then is a little bit firmer. That's also the thing with the adaptive M suspension here. To me, it is notably firm. Let's go back to the comfort mode here. So in normal driving situations, sometimes you feel that the normal adaptive suspension setup would be more suitable, more comfortable. Here, of course, in that M Performance version, it's just a little bit cooler, basically, that you have that sportier ride for that M version in sporty situations. But I would prefer, for normal everyday driving, I would prefer actually the normal adaptive suspension setup. In the tunnel, we see less ambient lighting than in the X5. So the thing is that the X5 indeed gives you a little bit more wheelbase, a little bit more weight. Suspension setup is a little bit softer. Overall, it gives indeed a little bit more calmness, serenity, sophistication, better noise insulation also at higher speeds. And the X3 with that less weight, a little bit more agility, better driving dynamics, that is the difference. Length difference, as I said, 21 centimeters, about 9 inches. You do feel it also when parking in and out in the city and so on. However, since we have the rear axle steering for the X5, that is then, making the difference a little bit smaller, especially when thinking about turning circle and so on. So that technology highlight definitely helps the X5 to even out that difference. In the pricing, the thing is, you can get the one with the X3 badge here, less than 60k, and with the X5 badge, more than 60k. It really depends then also on the version, how much you really have to pay for that. But we'll talk about the prices later on in the final conclusion then. But the thing is, here it's really about, do you want that extra sense of agility, or do you want that extra sense of sophistication in the X5? If you come from one of the vehicles and switch to the other one, you immediately feel at home. That's the cool thing here. I hate the gesture controls. Usually I deactivate, especially when I'm talking to you and have used some gestures. I always activate something right in there. Once again, you see a little bit of the ambient lighting. It's also quite neat, but definitely a little bit cooler in the X5. And we have one more time acceleration. We'll also stick here this time in the normal comfort mode. See how that one turns out. And when I just accelerate it out, let's see how that one plays. So when the tunnel is finished, speed is lifted, speed limit is lifted. Let's go. Pin down. Nice sound here. Definitely with this internal enhancement. Oh yeah. Whoa, yeah, this one feels way sportier now, especially even though I'm not in that sportier suspension mode. Really cool. And then it's put in the sport suspension mode. Now I get a little bit more feedback. Oh, even more, turning the RPMs up sound-wise. This feels super sporty, especially in the M40i version. So although it's the very same engine here, it feels definitely sportier, lighter combination with the car. But it's also louder here at higher speeds. But that engine is really a gem. As for the performance, not the best six-cylinder as for the fuel economy, that's not, but definitely in performance. And we in Germany we always say Laufkultur, listen and repeat, Laufkultur. The direct translation would be like running culture, and you know, yeah, how cultivated it feels means in the German engineering sense. You know, you get this sonorous sound, low RPM feeling that already from low RPMs it's pushing you, but in a more, let's say, natural kind of way, not a sudden power surge, but you always keep a very strong feeling of that engine, but also, you know, you have like this gut feeling, hey, I feel connected and there's a lot of power reserve. I don't have to use all the power, but I could at any time. This is then what we mean by Laufkultur. Actually, listen and repeat. Laufkultur. Yeah, really nice German engineering words. So we experienced some of the performance driving. The handling itself, yes, some differences. They come close in some aspects, in some other aspects they're a little bit more apart. Both are great, lovely rides, and one of the most fun rides, each in their SUV segments, I feel. One more time, sports mode, sports shifting mode, and now agile corners with the X3. No air suspension in this case here for this vehicle, and that makes it also a little bit rougher, especially in its sports setup. However, we now have less weight. Less of weight, yeah, you feel that. It pushes less into the corners. Also great rear wheel bias from an all-wheel drive. Engine feels indeed similar. So smooth here out of the corners, I have to say. Yeah, I mean, it is in a way more fun, and you sit a little bit lower to the road. That makes a difference, and you have a more direct feeling. So what you do with the steering wheel, you have the feeling that it has more direct effect to the road. However, it also makes it a little bit less calm, I would say. So when you drive the X5 in a sporty way, at the same time you keep more of that calmness and sophistication, whereas the X3, especially in that M trim, in the M performance trim, gives you more a little bit of that beast mode, you know. So yeah, it does deliver you more driving fun, definitely. But is it enough, or more than enough driving fun that it would justify the difference? Say like, hey, I'm getting the X3 because it does deliver more driving fun. I would not say that this is the crucial thing, you know. So both give you driving fun. The X3 a little bit more direct feeling, a little bit lighter feeling, yes. but I would not say that it delivers you so much more driving fun that this would be the crucial thing to decide on if you go X3 versus X5. Yeah, and this doesn't make it any easier for me, you know, in the very final decision for today. X5 or X3? Well, I think to me the X5 looks a little bit stronger, looks a little bit cooler. I like both from the exterior, no doubt, not a clear winner. Maybe a little favor of the X5, but just a little bit actually. Interior, they're also quite similar, so I don't have any favorite on the interior. The X5 maybe a little bit more comfortable. Price performance wise, clearly the X3 because it doesn't have much less legroom. It's just a little bit of trunk difference, X3 and the X5. So if you would ask me, is it worth the price extra for the X5? You would definitely say no. These concise vehicles here, 16,000 euros or dollars difference, M40i versus 40i, but that's because you have the 6-cylinder. If you would go for this spec then and also versus the 4-cylinder, for example, in the X3, then the price difference is larger and it becomes clear that the X3 is the more clever choice. If you ask me, high spec X3 versus low spec X5 with the slim price difference, I would tend to the X5 in the US. You can also get it with rear-wheel drive only as the entry-level version. They both now also offer great animal skin alternatives. Sensor fin, more elaborate material here, but also upgraded perforated sensor tech, more breathable in the X3. So great choice we have there. Meanwhile, for both vehicles in all the different markets, that's actually pretty fancy. So indeed, they do come close. The X5 gives me a little bit more elaborated sophistication in the driving feeling. I do appreciate that. So if price doesn't play a role, I would still go for the X5, especially because that rear axle steering can actually limit that agility difference you would have between the two vehicles as for the weight and so on. So that's actually a crucial thing to me. But if price plays a role in any sense, then it's definitely the X3. Well, about you, what do you think about our comparison episode for today? Tell me in the comments. And also tune in to more brand internal comparisons, for example, more with BMW or with Audi.